Week one of LCS is in the books. We got lots to talk about. What are the biggest surprises? We got 100 Thieves. Are they ahead of schedule? Team Liquid? Consistency issues, perhaps? That might be a reoccurring issue from last year. LCK issues. A pretty big Reddit thread that we're going to get into. We have some opinions on that. All that and more on episode 149 of the Clown Fiesta podcast with Blue Jay and JNT250. So, Jinter, we're back. Week one.
We
Pretty damn
back.
good. Um, I guess yeah. Let's just talk about all the changes because we talked about like the changes that happened, but we didn't really live them yet. We experienced them this weekend. Just overall thoughts on the changes of the LCS. Noticeable, not noticeable, big deal, small deal.
I, I guess I'm kind of in between small deal and big deal because I thought the changes were all pretty good. I mean, I think a lot of them landed pretty seamlessly for the most part. I think the only area which just was a little bit awkward to understand the sort of dynamic was the playing of the delayed champion select because there's on a couple of occasions like once they cut back to the broadcast and the casters would do the welcome back. And then
Hmm.
if they had changed casters or they had brought a guest in, like so for example, on the first day they had Doublelift come in the second game. So they kind of spent like a little bit of time talking to Doublelift. And then today they spent a little bit of time talking to Licorice. And then obviously in between the second and the third games, they rotate casters, so you're getting new people on. But those times in games like the first game and the last game where there's like a bunch of dead space to fill, those felt a little bit awkward. But I do think that obviously the awkwardness will get cleaned up when the scheduling sort of becomes more consistent and more practiced. And so I think it's kind of just some week one issues slash jitters that I think are going to solve. But I think a lot of the changes, for the most part, that they did landed really, really well. I think just from the jump, the look of the broadcast when it came to the imagery, the graphics, how the whole, how the imagery and the color scheme and everything tied together, I thought it was really, really good.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you said. It very much feels like a so far so good type deal. Is like if it was this exact same product in like week six, I'd be a little bit more disappointed only because like it does seem quicker in between games still, but it still feels a little long. Like the average was around 20 minutes or whatever, right? Like we timed it a few times and it's like 20 minutes in between games feels pretty similar to last split or last year or last few years, honestly. Um, but it's still actually better, I think. I wouldn't be surprised if like the average last year was like 25 minutes because sometimes it felt really long. But yeah, I do think they'll get better as time goes on. And like you said, everything was pretty good. I really, really liked the look of like the layout of Champ Select and all that stuff. I thought it was great.
The main thing that I disliked about the broadcast, and it was weird because it only happened on certain occasions, was when they would have the player interview like within the "we'll be back in 3 minutes" break. I thought that was really, really weird. Like
Really?
there were some of the interviews where they kept it on the main broadcast. The interview was full screen. Then there were
Hmm.
other times where they would conduct the interview during the 3 minute break section, and they had the interview condensed in maybe 33% of the available space on the screen,
Yeah.
while it was just like an interview's going on in this like box on the right hand side, and then the whole left hand side is just the matches and the records of the teams and a 3 minute timer. It's like, dude, like, can we not just blow this thing up on the whole screen or what?
So it was that it was so small. That's what you didn't like about it.
Yeah, it just
Oh,
seemed
okay.
very unnecessary.
That okay, that I understand a little bit more because I what I was going to say was if they're gonna do the 3 minute break and they're gonna do the interview, I liked combining them. And honestly, it didn't matter much to me that it was smaller. I thought this is a way you save time. Instead of having two separate things, the 3 minute break and the interview, you just combine them because why not? So
But
to
I
me,
guess
I
I
thought
guess
that
I
that
don't
was good.
understand what the point of the 3 minute break is if you're doing an interview during it.
That part I agree with because I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah,
I don't.
and especially when I was talking about earlier how there's just seemed to be like some awkward and like awkward times they just had to sort of ramble and fill in time, and I felt like in the situations where they had previously combined the interview with the 3 minute timer, like they could have used those additional 3 minutes to not just have to just ramble, if you know what I mean, sort of.
Yeah, but anyways, it does advertise the schedule. I guess I don't know if we're missing something obvious, guys. Comment section because maybe we're missing something. But yeah, I gotta say I don't have an answer for what the point of the 3 minute break is anymore. Honestly, I didn't really ever know. I'm sure there's a reason though, right? Like there has to be a reason,
Previously they would they would run through like some of their sponsor imagery and whatnot, and obviously before and after they would
right?
run the like State Farm sponsored ads that they used to have. They seem to
And
not
Red
have those
Bull and
anymore. But yeah, it just that the the mixing of the 3-minute break and the interview just felt really weird to me. But apart from
Yeah.
that, I thought it was good, and it was additionally weird because there was normal interviews where they would just like have a normal interview on stage where it's on the entire screen. Like
Mhm.
pretty much any time after a Cloud9 game, the interview was like main. I think after TL won their game today, theirs was, but like for a lot of the other like smaller teams or maybe not as noticeable players and teams, it felt like that's when they did that. And if
Mhm.
that's the case, I also think that that's really robbing the fans really the potential to like have just lock in and watch this interview. Like
Maybe.
if the 3-minute break screen gets pulled up on my screen, I'm like kind of incentivizes me to come back in 3 minutes instead of staying
Yeah.
for this interview.
I guess I see your argument. To me, it's not that big of a deal, but I do like what you're saying does make some sense to like, oh, this is the time for me to get up and take off while they're doing an interview with someone. I get what you're
Just the
saying there.
dynamic of that felt a little bit weird, but like I said, I think this is something that they'll probably be able to figure out, and it'll become a lot more seamless going forward. Just because you're not going to have some of these delays that we did have in week one, and to be honest, that was no surprise. I think whenever a new split happens and there's a big overhaul of changes, whether that's to the broadcast itself or the dynamic of the broadcast, delays seem to pop up. So it was unfortunate that there was quite a lot of pauses and delays during the first week. The
Hmm.
one again in the Cloud9 versus NRG game was especially a killer considering the pause was longer than the game itself. But that stuff happens, and I think you're kind of just gonna have to chalk it up to it being week one of a new year.
Yep, that happens literally every year. There's games like that. It happens across all the leagues. It happens all the time. God really wish it wouldn't, but it just does, right? I don't think there's too much you could do about that. Twitch interactivity. I liked it. I bet there's better things they could do. I just have to admit that I don't really have those ideas yet.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know about
but
you,
I
but
do
it
like it.
just didn't seem that like whenever they would pick the lane to like focus on, it didn't even felt like that really happened. Like it kind of just felt like the game was still just naturally going on with the odd like, oh, let's watch this lane. Like I guess what I was kind of thinking of when they said that they were going to sort of put more focus toward that lane or dedicate more of the broadcast time or laning phase towards that lane, I was kind of expecting them to utilize more of the like dual the the tri lane view or like the dual lane view, kind of like a bit of a split screen type thing going on. So I guess
I
maybe
wondered
just
if they
my
were going to do some pro view. This is what I wondered. I know they don't have the pro view product anymore, but they can show a player's POV, right?
yeah, I
So
mean
like, I thought
that's
maybe
not a
they were
bad
going to do
idea.
something. I thought they were maybe going to do something like that, and maybe they did. I don't remember now.
I
I don't
can't
think they did.
I can't recall it being used in those specific instances. I think ProView like gameplay did get pulled up, but I don't think in the instances that we're talking about.
I think this just speaks to how seamless it was. Like again, I still think it's a good change, but like, did it really change much of the broadcast? Me, not really. Like, if they didn't say we're gonna watch this lane more than the others, I wouldn't even have noticed that they're trying at all to watch
Exactly,
that lane more.
and I think that's a better way of saying my point that I was trying to make at the beginning of this. Like, it just didn't felt like there was a heightened focus on that lane. It was just like, oh well, because we said we're gonna talk about mid lane, let's quickly pan back to mid lane, as
Still a
opposed to
good change
like
though.
having it be a dedicated focus.
Still a good change using Twitch chat and interacting like that. I'm I don't want to say I'm absolutely positive, but I have faith that they'll find better ways to use it and it will get better. I haven't brainstormed enough myself yet to figure out exactly how to do it, but it does seem like a good change.
Mm.
Net plus.
And I guess the last thing, just for me to talk about a little bit, because you did mention it a little bit towards the beginning, the transition times between games. I obviously the sentiment around the product seemed really positive. For the most part, I saw a ton of people on Twitter and Reddit talking about like, wow, you can really notice the time between games, and I'm wondering if there's a little bit of a placebo effect to that at the moment, because for the most part, going back in the previous years, the transition times between games have been anywhere between like 22 to 30 minutes, and I
Hmm.
timed every single transition games just from this first week. Now, obviously, as I mentioned from the get go, there's going to be some week one jitters and errors and issues that happen. So I'm not expecting this to be the norm going forward. But it was still a 20-minute transition between end of game and beginning of game, which, as Mark C stated, that was their aim, was to reduce about 50% of the time from end of game to beginning of next game. And while I would say, the fact that it got shorter to begin with is a good thing, and as I said from the jump, there was like there were many instances of dead time where they kind of needed it would have been optimal for there to be it to be not as long. So I guess what I'm saying here is I'm expecting that time to go down slowly but surely over the course of the season, but we have a bit of a ways to go until we hit that 50% goal.
Something that I went back and forth in my mind on this weekend was with the champ select. Um, was whether instead of just showing a replay of the full champ select, if they should just throw it up and let the casters talk for as long as they think they need to. Because I would argue that when we're watching it, since we know that the champ select is actually done already, champ select doesn't need to be a whole 5 minutes or however long. It could just be a simple 2 to 3 minute discussion on what they think is interesting, and then get into the next game. Would you be for or not for that change? Assuming that they would be able to do it and that everyone's ready to go and get into the game.
I mean, I think I'm still preferring the way that it's done now. I just think
Okay.
that that would just make for a really weird dynamic of champion select and how it completely differs from the rest of the world and how it would even differ from what it's going to look like during playoffs. Like, I just don't think that's a change that needs to be had.
The only reason why I thought about it is because I know the goal. Well, the LCS goal they say is to reduce transition times in between games, right? And I was like, well, that's one thing you could do. And like I said, I went back and forth in my mind about that this weekend because for the same reasons that like if they just threw it up, I don't know if it would feel like champ select anymore. But as we're watching it slowly pan out, I'm just like, the casters are just killing time right now, waiting for the next pick, even though in theory we should know what the next pick is already.
I
So that was
guess,
the
but
only thing that I thought was a little bit jank was, and the other thought that I had was instead of throwing the whole champ select up, just let the casters pull up like a few picks at a time. So it could be like B1, and then you can hit like kind of like a next slide type thing, which is like R1 2, and then B2 3, and then like they just decide at their own pace. If I have more to say on it, talk about it, and then when you're ready for the next pick to come up, hit the next button, and that's a way that you could go through champ select at their own pace. Does that make any sense, or is that also just weird?
I think it's just weird purely from the standpoint is that's just not what the league that's not what champion select is since the inception of League of Legends. Like that,
True,
and
but
it's
champ
not going to
select
be
has
the
never been
same.
pre-recorded, right? Like you're right, that's not what champ select has been, but champ select has never been pre-recorded. So it's like we're already stepping outside of what normal is.
I guess, but
And so like
I think you still lose some of the nuance of champion select, which can include random hovers that obviously get the crowd engaged. You lose that ability to because like when you watch a champion select, I think you see this more often in playoffs than not. When champion select happens very quickly, especially from one team's perspective, it sort of gives you the idea that this team has drafted this specific strategy. They know exactly what to do. They know what their picks are, and I don't know. I feel like that's something that you would lose if you did it in any other format. I feel like it's hard to describe, but when you're watching champions, like it makes a lot of sense. Like when an enemy team makes their pick and then the opposing team instantly responds with their next two picks right away, I feel
mhm,
like that creates like a talking point for the casters themselves.
100%. I think
And
you're
I
right.
think that's something that you would then miss if you did it any other way that wasn't the normal way.
Yeah,
It's
and,
hard to
and
say without actually seeing it happen, but I just get the feeling that it would just look and feel too weird.
it's reasons like that why I couldn't convince myself for sure that I would want that change. Like I said, all weekend I was like, would I want that? Would I not want that? Anyways, I wouldn't mind if they tried it because again, I think this whole split is dedicated towards just trying stuff. And because we know it's not going to last in playoffs, playoffs are going back to normal when it comes to draft, right? And they're just going to do regular draft on stage as far as we know. I think that's what
The
they said.
the
I would be
only
willing to see that tried,
The
but
only situation where I could see that be of value is if the analysts and casters were doing some form of dedicated bit to where it was like, well, instead of this, I would have picked this if I was this team or something like that. Because like if you already
mhm.
know the results instantly, maybe the casters can say something like, "Oh, I think this pick would have been better at this point, or I would have banned this champion here." And it's like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's hard to say.
Yeah, I do agree with you that the step by step thing is kind of important for drafts. So I guess I wouldn't be in favor of throwing up the full draft all at once. But like if they made the change, I'd be more in favor of the here's B1, talk about it, and then if they have like your double lift or licorice on the like they had this weekend, like what would you pick here? And then and then they show the next pick. That's if they made a change, I would prefer it be that. But I'm not gonna get all bent out of shape if they keep it the way it is now because I mean, yeah, I still thought overall it was good changes, honestly.
Status quo, I say.
Yeah. So overall, very good. Yep.
Yes.
Before we move on, we're going to talk about all the teams. So we're going to talk about, God, we got all the teams to go through, lots of different things to talk about. Before we do, remember to subscribe, guys. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment. Last week, I apologize. I didn't get to reply to any of the comments. I had stuff going on. I did read them all, though. And I do promise that I will read them all again this week. And the other thing, too, if you're new to this podcast, we go on a bunch of different platforms. So we're live every Sunday night. We still don't know what time to say. So that'll change maybe over time, but we're live on YouTube and Twitch. And then, of course, we upload to YouTube. We upload to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, basically wherever you can find podcasts. You'll find the Clown Fiesta podcast. Be sure to look for us there. And yeah, so okay. Uh, Teams, Jinter.
Yeah, we got
Where are we starting?
well, I figured we start at the top. We got 2-0 teams, Cloud9 and FlyQuest. Not necessarily
Hmm.
surprising, considering that we expected these two teams to be towards the top of the league. However, I think one thing that was a little bit surprising was the fact that Cloud9 kind of just dominated NRG. There was a moment sort of in the later part of the early game where NRG kind of responded. It was where Contract sort of made that giga play in C9's bot side jungle. I want to say it was like 8 or 9 minutes, but really apart from that, C9 was in the driver's seat from the jump.
Yeah, that's the way. I feel like that's what Cloud9 really wanted to show to earn that trust of, yes, we are going to be this insane super team. And honestly, that's the team. That's one of the teams I should say that you have to beat. The other one is FlyQuest, who also went 2-0. Um, I feel like there's not a lot Cloud9 can do to change their opinion in a good way. Like, these were 2 wins that I think if you get them, no one's gonna say, "Oh, I have more faith in Cloud9 now." Like, pretty much everyone had them ranked number 1 anyways. So it's like, "Okay, you did what you were supposed to do. Let's see if you could do it again next week." That's kinda how I feel about Cloud9. They just looked solid pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, even if they lost to NRG, even if it was a close game, I don't necessarily think people would have been like, you know, oh my God, CNA is not as good as we thought they were, just purely because they have two newer players on their team. I know Vulcan did previously play for the team, but two new players nonetheless. But it was just the fact that they dominated NRG. NRG was basically had no chance, minus the one counterplay that they made in their bot side jungle at like 9 minutes into the game.
Yeah. What's interesting is that, like, a lot of the discussion coming into the year, not just from us, but like others as well, was like, could there possibly be an issue with Blabber wanting resources, JoJo wanting resources? And in these 2 games, they both just got them. Like, there was no issues there. There's plenty to go around. No one went hungry. Maybe you could argue Berserker went hungry by just
Yeah,
vibing out, but it's like
I mean, he was just chilling playing Poke Varus. I mean, if anything, you really saw like C9 still is going to be a mid jungle type team. That
yeah,
seemed very apparent from the first two games.
it feels like that kinda happened last split in summer as well for, like, the regular season where, like, Berserker didn't really need to do much. And that doesn't mean that he's not, like, a really good carry or anything like that. We obviously, in spring last year when he won MVP, like, that's the Berserker that you have. But it does I'm sure it probably gives Cloud9 fans some, I don't know, some relief, I guess, knowing that you can have this many cooks in the kitchen and none of them, have any issues of, this isn't my game to carry or anything like that.
It's
Which I know shouldn't be an issue, but sometimes it has been in the past. We've all been in games before where one guy's just absolutely popping off, and that somehow at the other end of the map they feel obligated to make a play. We've all been in games like that before. Cloud9
it's
does not have that issue.
It's funny that we're talking about Berserker kind of not being maybe super visible during this week from Cloud9, just purely because they were dominating throughout the mid jungle, and Fudge was doing a
Hmm.
pretty good job just controlling the lane in top lane both games. One of the voting things that they did on the broadcast was about Cloud9 and how like who is C9's best player, and the
Yeah,
Twitch chat vote said Berserker, so it's kind of
yeah,
funny.
but that's not a wrong answer, right?
Oh, I mean, that's who I would have voted if I actually was typing in the chat.
See, and this is where, like, Cloud9, it just speaks again to how good Cloud9 is and how good they're supposed to be. That, like, I think you could have said all 3 players, mid, jungle, and bot, and you wouldn't have been wrong necessarily. Because if someone said JoJo, I'd be like, okay. If someone said Blabber, I'd be like, okay. The same thing goes with Berserker. Okay.
Yeah.
Also, Fudge was another guy that, like, I think a lot of people coming into the season is like, how's this guy going to perform? He had a pretty weak year last year. I think it's about as good as it can go. He looked really solid in both laning phases. Was he absolutely popping off? No, not really. But like he was winning. Not much more you can ask for.
Yeah, I mean, he was definitely. He seemed to be one of the more knowledgeable Udyr players that we saw in the LCS this week, and I'm mostly speaking on that from watching I Will Dominate's videos regarding the C9 games. And the reason I say that is because for the people who don't know, I Will Dominate was one of the really early adopters of top lane Udyr, and so he seems to have a lot of knowledge on how the champion functions, how various lanes are supposed to go. And from what I heard of him, it was really that he was the only good Udyr. I say good in quotations for the audio only people. Only good Udyr that we saw in the LCS.
Yeah, the other thing too is like I think we're starting to see in other regions as well, but like I think you're gonna need to have specific matchups into the Udyr because I think Udyr is like really, really strong. But I have seen some people play we've seen some Olaf lately. I feel like Olaf is probably a really good pick into it. And what else did I see? I think who played Darius? Was it an LCK game? I
Might have
watched too
been.
many games now.
Not sure. I can't. I didn't even know Darius was played into it. I did know that
Darius
Darius.
was played
I did know that
somewhere.
Darius was getting banned on the second phase in the LEC when they were picking Udyr. I didn't know that somebody actually picked it though, and
Maybe
they
it
were
was Keen.
specifically banning it against Adam. So don't know how.
I'm thinking it was Keen now, but someone could fact check me on that in the comments section. Regardless, I think Darius is another pick that you could see into it. I feel like the Udyr pick is going to be something that we're going to see a lot of because I do think it's strong, but I do think it's something that you're not going to get away with blind picking for long once people start to find the counters.
Yeah, especially when you see some of the other top lane champions that are getting buffed in a couple of the next patches. The number one, I would say, being Camille. Camille is like the known champion to pick into these like very beefy tanks because Camille's one of the few top laners that just absolutely shreds tanks. Fiora as well. I know Fiora's not necessarily a pick that's super popular, but it was a pick that was super popular when Cassante was really popping up at the beginning of last season because Cassante was a super giga tank then.
Yeah. Anything else on C9 or should we get onto the FlyQuest side of things?
Uh, I don't know. It's hard to say. I feel like C9. We kind of said it in our last episode, and I think we said it initially when the roster got put together. It's kind of their split to lose at this point.
Yeah. And honestly, maybe we should look over to FlyQuest because it's 1 week, right? This is the week of week 1 is also known as like it's early but
Yeah.
you know, it's
Yeah.
early but FlyQuest looked really solid pretty much everywhere. The only thing is like bot lane, I it's not even that I had problems with Masu, it's that I didn't want to see so we saw Meech and Masu both play like one of them played Seraphine and I think it was Masu that played Senna and it's like it's not like you can't show any skill expression on those champions. But I really would have liked to have like, that's not who I want to see these guys playing in their debut week or weekend, I guess. But they still look solid overall. Maybe Masu needs to work on his skill shots with the Jin. Um, that I guess I could maybe give some criticism there, but overall looked pretty solid. And any worry about the Cloud9 guys being rusty didn't really look to be the case.
You said Cloud9. Did you mean FlyQuest?
Oh yeah, I definitely mean FlyQuest.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, you could also apply that to Cloud9, but yeah, FlyQuest.
Well, especially considering you've kind of said your concerns about players who are coming off of breaks, and obviously
Is
Bwipo has been
rest.
on a
Yeah.
year-long break, Inspired half a year break. Jensen kind of took a break last year, just vibing on Dignitas.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
but
was a it
yeah,
was a hangout split.
the the top side of FlyQuest was they were great. You know, bot lane didn't really have to do a whole lot, and they didn't necessarily have champions that were required to do a whole lot because you said in that first game they're playing Senna Seraphine. In the second game, they're just playing poke lane of Ash Jin, which, you know, Jin obviously still does a lot of damage, but up until the first 20 minutes of the game, the champion purely is utility based, just
Mhm.
because of the traps and the root and the ultimate. But they did their job. They did what they needed to do. They let the top side carry. Whippo looked pretty good. I mean, obviously we know laning phase is one of his biggest strengths, and he looked good in both of those lanes that he had. He obviously had strong laning picks in the Olaf and the Udyr, and Inspired is that guy. I mean, he is the guy that can take it to Blabber, and it just makes the C9 versus FlyQuest matchup that more hype going forward.
Yeah, it I don't know if C9 plays FlyQuest this week, but like I really hope that whenever these two meet, I want them to both be undefeated. I think that would be really, really good for the league. Um, Jensen. So a couple weeks ago, I went on Hotline League and I made the point. I want to know what you think of this take, Jinter. I made the point that like this could be Jensen's like make or break split, and this is like his biggest prove yourself split since his first year in the LCS, way back in season, what was it, like 5, 6?
5 summer, yeah.
5?
Summer of
Yeah,
5.
when he played the AP cog, whatever. And so I want to know what you think about that. Do you think like, because my thoughts were, um, with Jensen not having such a great year last year, we said he was hanging out on Dignitas. The year before that, Cloud9 just got rid of him after summer, and he had a split off as well. It felt like there's not as much confidence in Jensen as there would have been in the past, because for years and years he's been one of our best mids. Do you feel like that's true? My worry is that FlyQuest would look to replace him if he even looked a little bit shaky, because I think FlyQuest really wants to win now. What do you think about that?
I mean, definitely. I definitely think they want to win now, and that's not. I mean, you can say that because of the moves that they made in the offseason and their continued. What's the word I'm looking for? Their continued pursuit of a strong lineup, I guess. You know, they previously were a team that didn't necessarily field the strongest of rosters, more were on the side of kind of developing, but they're kind of in that mode now where they think that they have players with the chance to win the LCS. And I think individually, this is a team that could match up to the likes of Cloud9. Now, the bot lane, maybe not as much, but I think if you look at mid top jungle, these are good enough players to, run the league.
Yeah, and I guess the reason why I wanted to know what you thought about that was because I think this is like nearly as good of a start as you could ask for out of Jensen. I do think that he may have misplayed a time or two against Insanity, the Zach mid that he was up against, and maybe got away with Insanity kind of running it down a little bit. But overall, Jensen still had a really solid weekend. So like I feel like really good start for him, and FlyQuest is really what they're getting what they want out of him
Don't
so
think
far.
he would have been laning against Zach mid very often, so don't know how
No.
how much you can blame him for that per se, but
Maybe it's just because I was like, I used to one trick Zach, even though that was in like God season 6, I think. It's been a long time. My point is like, there was a couple times that he's walking up, and I'm like, Zach could kill him right now, and then like he actually did die, even though he ended up trading 1-for-1 because of a turret shot. I feel like a lot of the issues that Insanity was just kind of misplaying himself on the Zach as well. I feel like if Insanity isn't fucking up, Jensen might be losing that lane, but
dude,
that's kind of
I think if
eh.
Insanity took Conqueror in that lane, he would have won the lane. Insanity was
Or
fucking him up.
or
Insanity was
that. So
fucking him up with the Zac, and he would have got the increased healing on the blobs with the Conqueror, more damage, so he wouldn't have had to flash on our tower in that one instance. Like, dude, his Aftershock was doing nothing. That shit was so useless in lane, it was like actually hard to watch.
all this to say that Jensen had a good week, but I'm trying to acknowledge that like a part of it was Insanity not being the greatest lane opponent for Jensen. So like maybe he needs to be tested more. Who else did they play? Did they play Immortals?
They played
I don't
Immortals,
think.
yeah.
Yeah, because um he was shitting on, what was he playing? He was playing
He's playing
Azir
Azir. I mean,
into
Azir's
what?
like Corki or some
It
bullshit. I
was
don't know.
Corki, yeah, and he kept solo killing the Corki. Yeah. So anyway. Whippo played well. He may have been hooked a couple of times, but eventually that became a good thing when he was on the Olaf. It was like, okay, you don't want to hook the Olaf. He played well. FlyQuest looked good. That's pretty much it. And Keldrick in the live chat letting us know that Cloud9 and FlyQuest play each other February 3rd. Thank you, Keldrick.
That's week. Yeah, that would be week
3.
3.
Yeah. So week
So
3.
hopefully
So
they'll be 4
theoretically they
0.
could, yeah, theoretically they could both be undefeated by that time. It seems like that would make sense. Anything else on FlyQuest?
I don't think did they announce any like cause that they're doing or whatever? I don't,
You might
they're
know
not
my
about that
take
life
on this
anymore.
already. So, have I talked with you about this before? I was thinking of calling the Hotline League with a take about this. That was like, I feel like FlyQuest has lost their brand. Have you and I talked about this before? I've definitely talked with Andrew about it.
I think we might have. I think we might have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like either that or they are doing it and they're not letting people know that they're doing anything, which is also not good. Like maybe their marketing
Yeah.
sucks. I don't know, but like I d- I love FlyQuest, and I don't want FlyQuest to just become just another team that is good. Like, don't get me wrong, I like having good teams, but they were a unique brand. I don't want to lose that, and I don't think it's too late for them to, get back into the team good.
We'll have to think of a good cause and hit them up.
Yeah, maybe a good cause could be subscribing to the Clown Fiesta podcast.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. Okay. 1-1 teams. Which one are we starting with? Should we start at 100 Thieves because it's like not expected that they win a game?
Yeah, honestly, well, here's the thing. Here's the thing about that 100 Thieves versus Team Liquid game. TL cooked up one of the most dog shit mid ADC support trios that I've seen in a little while, with the squishy immobile trio of Ziggs, Jin, Ash, which literally every single fight that happened in that game, two of them were getting blown up instantly. Anytime that Vi pressed ult on any one of those three targets, they instantly died. So I think TL's probably regretting that, like, probably about 15 minutes into the game, they realized, like, oh shit, if the enemy team plays properly, we are going to lose. And it kind of took 100 Thieves a little bit of a while to figure it out how to fight, but once they identified, hey, we need to flank these guys, they started winning.
Okay, let's kind of combine the TL and 100 Thieves then, just mostly because of that game. So I did not think 100 Thieves looked very good. Still, like this weekend, I didn't think they looked good. They to me still look like a bottom team. However, they did punish really well, like you said, flanking. But like this is so TL. Like this is so TL to throw a game. Like this is very much what we're used to getting out of TL, where they have leads and then they throw them again.
Did they
So
throw?
yeah,
I don't know if they threw.
no, they threw. Like okay, being flanked when you're sieging. So they were up like 3.5K. So not a huge
It's like a
lead.
that's like a borderline they threw.
It's still a throw. It's still a throw. There are degrees of throws, but that is absolutely still a throw. The biggest problem that I have is like getting flanked from a deep ward when you're sieging a tower is like 101 what happens when a team is trying to come back. Like this is not new at all. And so the fact that TL was so blindsided by this flank, even as deep as it was, you should still be able to have a ward behind you in the lane to catch that flank from happening. Like there are things that teams do that even if they don't catch the TPs, first of all, sometimes they just catch it because they're ready for a TP flank anyways. But even if you don't catch it, you have a ward behind you so that if you see it coming, you have time to react. It didn't feel like they had time to react at all to that, which is just classic not properly setting up to see. That's what I got from that game was like this game was thrown from TL. They should have closed it out. You mentioned the draft was shit. Sure, I don't really have any strong opinions there. My point is they should close out that game. And yes, you give props to 100 Thieves for setting up the deep ward flank, but TL should be ready for this. This is not a new strategy that we see from teams coming when they're trying to come back in games. TP flank is like the oldest trick in the book.
Yeah, I mean, I guess because I mean they did it on multiple occasions. Like they double TP flanked them, I think, 3 times. So, and I think even in all those 3 times, it wasn't like it was just wards that was kind of sitting directly behind them. And at least the one that happened mid and the one that happened bot when they were sieging, they were like deep as hell wards. So, I mean, I don't think that those are wards that you're necessarily thinking are going to be in play. Like if the enemy team is sitting in their base, or like if the enemy team is defending their base, you're not
Hmm.
necessarily sweeping the side of the jungle that's closest to river. You're sort of sweeping that side of the jungle that's closest towards their base, like where the wolves and the blue buff are, not necessarily back where like the blast cone and the gromp is and stuff like that. So I maybe it was just it might have just been something as simple as they didn't sweep it, but I think at the same time, like it's not necessarily an area that's super obvious to sweep when sort of in reference to the other team, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I want to reiterate because I did say like and I want to make clear I don't expect you to sweep the whole goddamn map before you siege a tower. If you ever do that, your Baron's gonna run out or whatever you're trying to do. Like you're not going to have time by the time like Dragon's gonna come up or something. You're never gonna have time to sweep the whole map. What you do have time to do is get a ward behind you so that you could see when you're being flanked. You just ward the lane behind you. You ward different spots behind you so that even if you don't see the TP itself, you will eventually see the person that is flanking you and you can react to it.
True.
That's pretty common. And they didn't do that.
I
So
I
it's
I
like,
s
okay, come
like,
on,
I
man.
I guess I would say even if they did that, I don't think that they were gonna win those fights anyways. Because I mean,
Maybe.
you see some of those fights they played out, whichever target got ulted died every single time.
So that is true. And um if they do catch the flank and they still can't react to it because like their champions are just being outplayed, then then I think that's when you point to draft diff or something like that. But I'm always, you know me, and I think you're usually on the same side of this with me that like you and I have always hesitated to point to
Oh,
draft
yeah.
when there's very obvious
This one
flaws
was
that
just
happen in the game.
specifically dog shit.
Yeah, and I think we're on the same page there, and I think you would also agree with me that, like, execution matters more than the draft. It's just in
Yeah,
this case, the execution and the draft may have been bad, and that's gonna lead to a loss.
yeah.
Yeah. To give more credit to 100 Thieves, Quid didn't look like trash. We kind of expected him to be terrible.
Yeah, honestly, I expected him to be pretty bad, and he specifically in that Team Liquid game, looked pretty good. even in the
Let's go
100,
Quid.
even in the game against Cloud9, like it wasn't like he was getting destroyed by JoJo. Like it was more just they really weren't playing around mid lane a lot. It was more just JoJo was getting the push and then was pressuring the rest of the map as opposed to just going in on Quid constantly. But he held his own, which I think is all you can really ask for, is to hold your own against the best mid laner in the league who's hyper aggressive and likes to go for solo kills. And you don't get solo killed, kind of a little bit of a moral victory, I would say.
Yeah, this is the classic. It's early, but it's early, but you know what? He held his own. Let's go Quid.
Yeah.
We are big time Quid
Sniper
doubters,
whipped out the
and
Riven. Only took him the first game.
yeah, that was so
It
like,
took
come on,
Viper
man.
it took
How
Viper 7
awesome.
games, so and he
Like,
did it in 1 game, so I think we can already safely say that Sniper is better than his older brother.
done deal. Clip it and ship it. No, honestly though, how awesome is that? Like, that is exactly what we would have wanted. I can't pretend like we saw the craziest of 1v1s with the Riven, but like we got to see the Riven. We got to see him do the flank. And yeah, I just said how TL should have caught the flank, but he did do the flank and it worked out. And we saw some cool stuff. So
It's kinda
yeah,
funny 'cause apart from those flank plays, the Riven was pretty useless for the most part, like,
didn't do a whole
he
lot.
lost lane, but, I mean, obviously, Udyr is a lane dominant champion, died in side lanes 2 times, being pretty
Overextended. Yep.
greedy, and I think, he made some pretty typical rookie mistakes, and
Very much
I
so.
guess part of the reason why we're maybe saying 100 Thieves a little bit ahead of schedule is, River, we haven't talked about him. He's still a very solid jungler. He was the entire reason that they won that game against TL. He just played really, really well.
Yeah,
And
you do have River.
The fact that Quid wasn't running it down, also a very good sign.
Yep. Yeah, nothing but, well, I shouldn't say nothing but good things, but we have some good things to talk about 100 Thieves,
Mhm.
which is that's very good. That means that you're not 8th usually, cuz usually it's the 8th place team that we struggle to,
Oh,
well, we
don't
just
worry.
struggle to say good
We'll
things.
be getting there.
we we will
Oh,
get
don't
there.
worry.
Okay, I don't want to move on from TL yet because we still need to talk about APA. Now, his second game,
He's
much
never gonna
better,
escape the allegations.
but the first game, okay, so last week I said something to the effect of like, I'm waiting to see how this guy looks in summer. Like, I want to give this guy time. We mentioned last year he played the whole split without being able to communicate with his teammates. And yes, it looked rough, but he's a fresh player and blah 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 blah. Okay, I want to be patient and wait and see how he performs in summer. But when you're just inting it on Ziggs, like, you got to draw the line somewhere. Like, he could not leave as soon as he thought it was a good idea to leave mid. He would just die instantly. Every time he would leave mid and he would try to rotate back towards mid, and every time coming back to his lane, he would just die. Or if there's a play happening in another lane, he can't just vibe out in the mid lane and stay safe. He would walk up and just get caught and die. Not a good start.
Yeah, especially because it was on his signature champion. It'd be a different story if he did that on a random mid lane champion, but the fact that it was kind of on his signature champion, I don't think necessarily helped his case.
It did not help his cause whatsoever. And I'm sympathetic to Ziggs players. I'm a Ziggs. Ziggs is my boy. But
Hmm.
I don't want to see the Ziggs if we're just gonna int it and run it down.
I
They
mean,
could have still won that game in spite of that.
from the jump, everyone knows I've been a Yon believer, and I think the first 2 games would be good in regards to the Yon believing trajectory because I thought he looked pretty good in both the games. Him and Core JJ continue to be one of the lane dominant bot lanes in the league. I think they're probably the best laning bot in the league. We'll have to see whether or not Vulcan and Berserker they kind of pick some champions that allow them to really show their laning skills,
Yeah,
or if Cloud9 wants to actively put resources into the bot lane, because like you said, it wasn't really something that we saw them do in summer of last year, and through the first 2 games, doesn't seem to be that they're looking to do that either.
Blabber
So
said in his interview, bot lane's so OP right now, so maybe we'll see more of that.
we'll just have to wait and see. But I
Yeah.
still really like Yon and Core JJ and how they lane. It's really good.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo that. I agree. I think they looked good. One more thing on TL that just came to my mind is I was listening to the dive this week, and they were talking about how Umpty is more of a play for his lanes kind of guy. Which, like, I guess my
The
point
Korean
in bringing
Smithy.
that up, my point in bringing that up is that, like, okay, now the pressure's really gonna be on Yan and APA. Or like, the pressure already was because they are the carries. But like, if your jungler is going to play that kind of style, because I guess Piosik was more for himself, right? They argue that Umpty is more for playing for his lanes. Like, i- if APA continues to run it down, this team could really struggle now because Piosik did take over games by himself last year. If Umpty's not that kind of player, we could really see some
Yon will
struggles
do
come
it.
from TL.
I got faith in Yon.
I hope one of them does. I hope both of them do, honestly. I wanna see Ziggs pop off. I don't wanna see Ziggs running it down. But anyway, that was just a thought that I had. That could really be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, APA. I'm trying to think if there's another player in the LCS whom, like, obviously apart from like the stars, like who else is a player that kind of is the most interesting player in the league, and I think it's APA just in terms of his performance and how it's going to affect Team Liquid. Because if he is a good to great mid laner, I think this team is going to probably be fighting for top two in
Yeah, so you're
standings
talking about
wise.
like how influential their performance is, right? Like make or
Yeah.
break, you mean?
hmm
Yeah, I think I can
APA,
get behind that.
he's the number one guy in the league, I think.
Yeah, because Cloud9, you could point to those guys and be like, okay, if one doesn't perform, you've got all the others.
Yeah, but I mean, it does seem to be if we take some data from last year as well. If APA is inting, Team Liquid is losing,
Okay.
and there's
Um,
no other options. Like,
yeah, no, that is accurate. Dignitas?
yeah, they're 1-1.
They
They're
exist. Yeah,
they're
Dignitas is a team.
they're chilling there in the middle. Man, the I gotta whip out some flame here because honestly, I thought the Dignitas versus NRG game was actually a game that I think Dig could have won. I think they're gonna look back on this
Okay.
game and say that they could have won the game, mostly because they did not play around top lane well at all. Like XU unfortunately did die that one time, or it was like level 4 or 5 or something, where he was in the enemy's tri brush awaiting Rich to push the wave and then attempt to dive.
Mhm.
However, Rich couldn't push the wave in time, and XU then tried to fight Dokla as he walked into the tri brush as Palafox was roaming up, died, gave Dokla a kill, then Umti came up, Rich died again, and basically took the wind out of the sail of top lane because Rich was winning that lane through the first 5 levels. And also, I just don't think they covered him top lane at all. Basically, after those first 2 deaths, so you kind of just saw Doklo destroying Rich in the side lane up until then the rest of Dig would collapse and kill him in response. But I just think that man, they could have won that game if they played around top lane better.
Yeah, maybe that maybe we can combine NRG as well in the dig conversation because that game was super interesting. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but it was really back and forth between Dokla and Rich. It was like solo kill, and gank. Now I feel like there were some ganks for Rich. Am I making that up? Because you say that they didn't really play around top, or am I just not understanding what you're saying?
Well, I mean, there was like at level 3 or 4, Rich and Dokla were both 1 HP. XU comes up, kills Dokla under the tower, die, and then run or yeah, kills him under the tower, then runs away. As Contracts is going up and around the big wall, he killed Rich in response, and then they both left. And then the next play that happened was where XU kind of got too excited in the enemy jungle, tried to fight Dokla, then died. Then 2 minutes later, Umti ran top lane, and Rich died again, and then the game was over from there, at least from Top's perspective. So I just think that it's a bit unfortunate just from the dig side of things because XU's a young player. I think with a more veteran jungler, they probably play that out a lot differently, and they probably win the lane because of that. And that's why I'm kind of like flaming dig a little bit here because they should have won that lane very hard in top lane, but they didn't because
Maybe.
XU misplayed it.
I do still think that XU had a pretty good weekend for his first weekend, though. Would you agree with that or not really?
His first game was good, but I mean, it was
Yeah.
against Immortals, so I don't know how much weight
Oh,
we need to put into that.
yeah, fair enough.
Like it
But
feels it feels bad to say that, but he did have a good first game.
we could just say that he played well, and we'll give it the its early butt, you know? Yeah. Um, I want to say Dove might get import of the week. Was there any other import that played well? Because I know Immortals didn't
Umti
really.
Umti played decent,
Umti
I
did have a
thought.
good week. I just thought Dove looked really, really good. The Azir specifically
He did look
is
good.
what's coming to mind. The Azir looked solid, and he was kind of popping off there.
I mean, he was getting a bit smacked earlier in the game, but he did once the mid game came around and he had 2 items, he started taking over.
So if we had import of the week, you'd give it to Umti over Dove?
Maybe, yes.
I
Yeah, I'm
think
gonna
I'd
I'm
give it
gonna
to
go yeah.
Dove, but I'm not sure. I do want to give credit to Umti for like when he like invaded and shit looked like it was going to be rough in that one game. They invaded and they didn't get the chickens, and it looked like he was going to be in deep shit. And then I don't know, maybe you could just give a little bit credit there for not falling behind. But anyway, um, How do you rate Rich's performance?
I mean, Rich had a really good first game. I thought the tank Gragas was really good. I'm gonna shout myself out because I literally said that we're gonna be seeing Gragas in solo lanes once again because they rebuffed his passive after they previously nerfed it. So I thought the tank Gragas was really, really good. Obviously, there was some bit of a fumble Ruski, we can say, when IMT tried to dive the full tank Gragas with two
Hmm.
members, and then a third one came at the last second. They didn't kill him. They got, and I mean, that's what really kind of sealed the game for Dignitas in that Dig versus Immortals game. But that tower
Okay.
dive was pretty tragic. And like I said, sorry to flame XU, but I think it was XU's fault that uh, top lane went so poorly in that game against NRG.
Yeah. Maybe I don't have anything else to say on the. Well, maybe we do need to talk about NRG a little bit. I was gonna switch us over to IMT a little bit, but maybe I'm getting ahead of
Yeah,
myself.
you're
The
skipping NRG, bro.
Yeah, the only reason why is because you mentioned the dive bot, and I thought the dive bot that Immortals tried to pull off was kind of the CC wasn't chained very well. It was like you didn't get full amounts of CC from the rel, and I think that was Olay's fault. Which I honestly thought Olay had a pretty good week, but that was an issue there. So like I feel like that dive actually goes okay normally if it's played properly, if the CC is stretched out to its maximum capacity.
Mm.
Okay, NRG. What happened with NRG? They got clapped by Cloud9 and then they clapped Dig?
Well, they didn't clap Dig. They beat Dig. I wouldn't say they clapped them.
Sure. Refresh my memory. We saw Senatom.
Yeah, and then they played. What, are you asking just for bot lane? Because in bot lane they played like Lucian something in the first game.
Was it Lucian Nami? No, I'm just trying to remember just because I usually so okay for people that don't know. Usually, what I do before we do these episodes is I rewatch all the games. I don't got time to do that this year because the games happen on Sunday and we record Sunday night. I don't got time to get through all the games, so I'm just having trouble remembering all of what happened with NRG.
I mean, they I don't know. I feel like this is a team where we're just gonna have to wait and collect a little bit more data on them before we can really form any opinions. Because I know that maybe a lot of some people weren't very happy that NRG was seemingly number two on almost every single power ranking list that came out. I mean, I cannot recall a single power ranking list that I watched, including our own, including the ones that got thrown up on the LCS broadcast, including all the ones that you see on YouTube getting posted throughout various content channels. All of them had Cloud9 number one, NRG number two.
Yeah.
And
So wait,
I
are you
just think that
saying?
well, I just think it's
Uh,
going to take some time, and I'm like, if everybody knows and thinks that Energy is going to be the number one two is going to be the number two team, I would expect this team to be 5-1 or 6-1 come the next part of the round robin, and they have to rematch against Cloud9, and that's kind of going to be the defining point of this is what we can truly say about this NRG team now.
I wasn't sure if you were saying like they should be number three or if they should be number one. Like instead of because you said everyone had them number two and that was us as well. I wasn't sure if you were saying like some people say that they should be number one or some people say they should be number three, like better or worse.
No, but I mean, I just don't think that we can't say anything. They lost Cloud9. Like,
Yeah, you can't be number one. Well, first of all, I didn't think they had any real chance of being number one. I know they beat G2, guys. I know. Everyone knows. We all remember. It was fucking awesome. There's no way I look at Cloud9's roster and don't put them number one. And then honestly, I wouldn't. I didn't put FlyQuest number two, but I wouldn't have been upset if someone did that. Like Inspired, you know what I think about Inspired. You know what I think about Bwipo. Like Jensen, these are good players. So like, yeah, I don't know.
I just think it's going to take the matches against teams like Team Liquid, FlyQuest, Cloud9 to really give us an idea of where this team is at in comparison to last year.
And not to mention, last year they kept losing to freaking Immortals. They lost to
Yeah,
all the bad
that didn't help
teams.
their case.
Yeah, maybe you could argue that things are going really rough for NRG because they lost to Cloud9 and they're supposed to beat Cloud9. Like this is it's not all going according to plan now.
Yeah. The one thing that we should definitely add, because I don't think this was, I mean, this wasn't something that I knew last week or even going into the season, was that apparently Energy was taking a much longer break than a lot of the
Yeah.
other teams going into the season. And well, obviously I can understand it from the standpoint of not wanting your players to get burnt out.
Yep.
I think that is it poor for me to say that NRG just doesn't have the luxury of doing that because they're just like not a very like over their history they're not a very good team slash org. I mean, obviously I'm including the CLG part of things, and You really
I think that
you
part's
have to go
irrelevant.
back to season 6.
I agree with the idea that they don't have the luxury, mostly because one, it's a 14 game season now instead
Yeah.
of 18,
New
and
patch,
two,
like,
and yeah, and two,
they
live patch. Like you need to keep up to date. So that's why I don't think they have the luxury. Nothing to do with what org they are or anything like that, or you're this player or that player. It's kind of difficult to take time off. Now, with that said, I've always been on the side of avoid burnout as much as possible, because burnout doesn't just ruin splits, sometimes it ruins careers as well. So if their players are coming to you and you're saying like, I feel burnt out because I grinded the whole, what was it, 10 months in a row last year, 11 if you count the December before, I don't mind players coming forward and saying, I'm burnt out a little bit, and you give them a break. It's like, does it hurt them to take more time off? Yes, it does. But I think it would hurt them more if you get them burnt out. So I don't think you have that option. That's where I stand.
yeah, I guess the expectation that I have now is I do not want to hear anything about well, we didn't start our competitive season, or we started our competitive season later. I don't want any NRG player to say anything with regards to we took a longer break or whatever as any form of an excuse, because I mean, I don't know, I would still say like they don't really, that team, that org, that doesn't, they don't have the luxury to do that, I don't think. Like
But
when
wouldn't you,
when G2 did it after season 8, season 9 going into season 10, when G2 did it, they had the luxury to do that.
just because they're G2 and because they're like
Or sorry,
Caps and
sorry,
Yankos, you mean? Or like, what do you mean?
I should say season 9 to well, cuz there was, I mean, there was a whole thing that came out, I can't remember, it was in 2021, 2022, whenever it was, but they basically said, they said that after Worlds Finals in season 9, they basically didn't really have an off season going into the next year.
Hmm.
They had no off season. They just perma was practicing because they themselves felt and believed that they were going to be able to win worlds the next year. And then they referenced that a bunch, I think it was then in season 11, 2021, when they were like, we took a very extended break coming into this year because we had basically worked nonstop for 2 years in a row. And I think that's a case where you are warranted and are deserving of an extra long break. But I mean,
I
I don't
get what
know.
you're saying, because you're saying like it's way more extreme to go for year, like more than a year without taking a break. Whereas like, you know, for NRG in this case, like it's just 1 year. I get what you're saying. Like it's one world's run, and it wasn't even that long of a run because they only went to quarters. So I get
And
what
it's
you're
not,
saying.
I wouldn't even
Like
say
it
it's a
is
year.
different.
It's not even a year because energy was only good, quote unquote, for summer. Like,
Sure, but that doesn't mean that they weren't playing and grinding, you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
that,
but I
how do you
mean,
think they get good? They didn't just suddenly get good. You get good because you've been grinding
no,
for
but I mean,
X amount of
I'm
years.
talking about from the standpoint of teams like Cloud9, like G2, who go off to MSI and whose spring splits are typically, a couple weeks, maybe even up to a month longer than the rest of the league.
I get what you're saying. I just think like I don't think there's just don't be burnt out forehead is not a strategy to me, you
No,
know?
sorry. Maybe that's not my point here. I guess what I should say, if it was a situation where the NRG players approached the staff and were all saying like, "Hey, it'd be nice if we could have a bit of an extra break because we've been feeling burnt out." But if it was just something where it was decided like, "Oh, because we did so well last year, we're now going to take an extended break," I think that is a lot worse. Well, I just say it's a lot worse. It's worse than just the players approaching the staff and being like, "Yeah, we could use a little bit of an extra break."
Yeah, that I would agree with. I agree with that. Actually, something I thought of too while we're talking about NRG was like this is one of the rosters that has the advantage of, oh, we kept a bunch of our players together. We only swapped out one guy. And some people would argue that it's an upgrade of who he over Ignar. But I think last year CLG, when it was still CLG coming into spring, came in with the whole same roster, and didn't they shit the bed to start? Wasn't that one of the teams that we expected to be so good because they kept everyone together, and then they started like 0-3 or something, or 0-4?
You're talking about in between 2022 and 2023?
Yes, I think that when it was CLG, I think that happened.
I don't think so because I don't even know now. I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure.
Anyways, I guess what I'm saying is, if that did happen, because that's what my memory's telling me. If that did happen, sometimes sticking together doesn't really mean anything. That it's all the same players coming back.
Hmm.
But anyways, I guess I would say so far passable grade. Like you lost to Cloud9, that's not a big surprise. Um, and then you beat who did they beat? Dig, who you're supposed to beat. So
Yeah.
you know,
Dude, it's with any sport. If you lose to the top team early in the season, that's an acceptable loss. Obviously, it doesn't look good for your record because you haven't played enough games to where that's really gonna the rest of your skill is not going to show in your record because you haven't played a large number of games. It's just unfortunate that they were playing Cloud9 in the first game of the season. Some teams are going to play the best teams in the league to start the season. Other teams are going to play the worst teams to start the season. It's just how it goes sometimes.
you could also even argue that playing Cloud9 the first game is better. Like
Yeah.
I would rather play Cloud9 the first game than like mid season or the end. Like now you've given them time to get their shit together, type deal. You know?
As a if yeah, as a upper team, I would definitely agree with that. You'd rather
Yeah.
play the good teams at the beginning.
The 0-2 teams, Immortals and Summoner's Rift.
Has that been a is that a
Do you see
thing?
Summoner's Rift when you see SR? That's what I see. I don't know if that's
No,
am I alone in that?
I don't see that. I didn't know if that was like people had been saying that or anything, but
No, when I always see SR, I think Summoner's Rift. Anyways, Shopify Rebellion is the other 0-2 team. These 0-2 teams are not the same.
yes, we can definitely agree with that they're not the same. Which one should we start
Immortals,
with?
yeah, Immortals looked way worse than Shopify did. Um, let's start with Shopify just because we'll give them a little bit more respect, I guess.
Okay.
Um, maybe we should start with Turtle being in instead of B-Voy.
Yeah, honestly, pretty surprising. Now, coming into the season, I didn't even realize that they still had Turtle on the roster as a sub. That was something that you had to remind me,
Yeah.
as the games were going on, but and funnily enough, I then went back and watched the video that they put out on their channel shortly before the season began, where they were just announcing their roster, and it was the head coach Revan, just kind of talking a little bit about the goals and what the roster and how they're going to play and all of that. And interestingly enough, they when they were like going through the lineup, they mentioned Turtle before they did Bvoy. And so I just wonder if that means that Turtle is strictly going to be the starter moving forward, or maybe there were some issues with Bvoy in the offseason and he's not necessarily acclimated to NA or hasn't practiced with the team too much. We don't really know
What
any of
video
that.
was this?
It
Was
was
this
just
just like
like,
a YouTube video or something?
yeah, it was just a video on the Shopify channel. It literally was nothing.
Shopify,
It
Shopify Rebellion Legends.
something like that. I don't know. But all it literally was, all I took out of that was they talked about Turtle before they talked about Bvoy, seeming to indicate that he's the starter going forward. So
I did
that's
hear it was probably on the dive that I heard like that's the only time this whole year that I've heard mention of visa issues was in reference to Bvoy, but I don't think they said for sure he has visa issues. It
mm,
might have been that they were playing against one another for the spot. I don't know. But I have heard nothing as far as visa issues except for in reference to Bvoy, and it wasn't even like for sure he has visa issues. I guess all my point in bringing it up is that that could be the reason.
mm.
Um, but yeah, maybe honestly, maybe Turtle just got the spot. Maybe they did tryouts and they were like, "Oh, Turtle's better." Turtle just won't go away, and I mean that in the best way possible.
Yeah, he's
Like,
they
how
said
many
it.
times have we thought Turtle's like bottom tier 80 carry? He is starting in the LCS again.
Yeah, it is weird because he has kind of been hovering around the bottom performance wise, probably the last maybe like 4 years. But he seems to still like. I mean, he's still Wild Turtle. He has pop off moments and he has very int moments, but in terms of overall skill, it still seems to be there. It's not like he's any worse. I don't think.
I would say he was one of their better performers this week, even though they didn't really do a whole lot of anything. I still think it was weird because even the casters mentioned it during the game. They're like, their bot lane's very aggressive. They're pushing a lot, but they're just not getting any CS leads or really anything out of it. And it was like, I think it was the Nami Lucian, right? I remember he was on Lucian. Was it Nami Lucian or was
I
it
think they
Lucian
played
Melio?
double. I think they played double Nami Lucian, like both
Oh, okay.
games.
I just remember it was Lucian, and the other thing that they even mentioned on broadcast too was something I was thinking of was like, what are you supposed to do this game? Their only play was like turtle dash in and hope that he could kill somebody, and it was like if you can't, then like, okay, I guess we got no play to make here. So
Dude, I swear to God, Trundle is still the fakest pick known to man. That champion ever since the jungle changes they made, I think it was in season 11, where they buffed all of the camps and their HP and whatnot. Trundle is just so ass. Never pick that champion in the jungle. It's terrible. Even with like the tanky, like obviously it was like in a vacuum, it was a decent pick because like, oh, you have two mega tanks on the enemy team. Trundle loves to press R on those tanks and live forever, but the champion just does nothing. I mean, it was just also like even more hilarious because he kept trying to gank bot lane against a Zeri, and he pillared Zeri I think 3 times while attempting to gank bot. Zeri just dashes over the pillar.
Yeah, those ganks were shit. I would also argue though, like so you could say the champion's bad and like
It's
can't
horrible.
gank
I,
there.
I
I
you will not convince me otherwise.
I don't mind that. Um, you could also argue like you got to realize that that's not a gank there. The gank the Zeri and pillar and
Oh,
she's
dude,
just gonna dash
so
over it.
so many
Like
times Boogie would just start running bot lane. He would be on a ward. It's not sometimes not even on a ward, but you just know that like this skank isn't gonna work. How are they ever gonna kill the Zeri Lulu? It's not even possible.
it the game shouldn't become so glaringly obvious off of one gank of how the game's going to go, but that's what happened with that gank. You were like, "Oh my god, they're so fucking desperate to make a play happen. This is your best is just hope Zeri messes up her E over
Did,
your pillar or
did he
whatever." Like,
even go top lane at all in the first 10 minutes of the game?
I don't know, I
We
don't
pick
remember.
we pick Rumble, and then we never go top ever in the game when you know that Udyr is looking to push the lane perma.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was the
I was
same
quite
game. Was it
complimentary of Boogie for the majority of 2023. This was one of the shit tier games that I saw from him.
was was he on Trundle the game where they had the Rumble top or what was he playing in that one?
Yeah, no, the game that had Rumble top was the game he was playing Trundle.
Okay. I just remember thinking like so I'm starting to think you're right that he didn't go top a lot because
He didn't.
I do remember thinking a
Like
lot
he
during
might
that
have
game that
went
Fake
top, but
God
like nothing to like actively do something to try to make a gank, get vision, pressure something. Like he might have visited the top side of the map, but he didn't do anything productive.
I do remember thinking that Fake God's just hanging out up there and he's just being dove. He got dove a couple of times. I would say that there the one time that he got dove, like he kind of greeted his Rumble ulti, and like if he ults the wave sooner, he might not get dove. But it's like he wanted to make sure like 100% that he was getting dove before laying it down, and then it was too late and they could still pull off the dive anyways. So that was like a little thing with Fake God, but I, I don't want to be too picky with him when like we said, it did feel a lot like he was left kind of alone and like I'm not gonna fault the guy for that much. I do want to see more out of Fake God in weeks to come. If we really like, I want the story of like Dokla, for example, where you get back in the LCS and you prove like I'm better than the last time you saw me. Um, didn't see it this week, but it's only 1 week. It's
Yeah,
early bud.
I think Shopify just forgot top lane existed this week.
You know.
Hopefully they'll figure that out for next week.
Do you want to see Insanity run back to Zach again, or have you lost faith?
He needs to take Conqueror. Then by
So
all
we're in
means pick it.
agreement. We do want to see him run it back
Yeah.
again.
I
I'll
mean,
take it.
you saw in the mid game of that game before like before TL or not TL, sorry, before FlyQuest just reached God
FlyQuest.
mode. Before FlyQuest just reached God mode with Senna Seraphine, like the Zach was doing work. Like the
Well,
Zach was
also
doing
Poppy
work.
was like inspired on Poppy was such a nightmare for them to deal with. Zach does not want to play into a Poppy.
Yeah, I mean
So
that
like
FlyQuest kind of just figured out about 20 minutes. Like, hey, if the Poppy just stands on top of the carries, they legitimately
yeah.
cannot win. Like they cannot win.
The only thing that Zach can do there, which is not ideal by the way,
Is
but the
like
only thing he
flash
can do
alt.
is well or that, but ulti or not ulti. So slingshot behind them so that you're not eing right on top of the poppy. You're just accepting that your E is not going to land on someone. You're using it as a way to get behind them, and then then you flank. As they're trying to run away, you ulti and push them back towards your team. You need to be very coordinated. Your team needs to be engaging as you're behind them already. And even that is still not ideal because now you're just using your E as a positional tool rather than an engage tool.
Yeah, or even do like the Q and then flash. Like you Q a tank and then
Yeah.
you try to flash auto another guy and then you insta press E after, then pop your ult. Like,
Which is also a problem because Flash is a long ass cooldown. So it's like it's not a
mm,
reliable like one of the best things about Zac is that he can engage every like 6 seconds or whatever at max rank E, right? So it's like you have this engage tool. Poppy just completely put that to bed. So it was like maybe a little bit poor planning on when to pick the Zac, but I do want to see it again. I want Insanity
yeah.
to get back to keep cooking, baby, until the food is no longer burnt.
And now is the part of the episode where we have to talk about Immortals.
Yeah. So
Hey, let's start off with the good. Let's start off with the good. Tactical and Ole actually looked all right.
Yeah, okay. We can agree with that. I agree with that. I got. Can we hit this? Do people hear this?
Their little thing up also just appeared above your face. I don't know if you saw that, but
No, I
a
didn't.
clapping hands emoji appeared in front of your face as you did that.
Nice. Okay, well, we'll give
So,
them that. Um, that's not to say Ole didn't have mistakes. I mentioned earlier against Dignitas the dive. I do think he could have stretched out the CC longer. I think he was too quick to use his initial stun. Does that make the dive go different? I think, but I'm not 100% sure. And the other play is you hook the Olaf. You can't hook the Olaf.
yeah.
But his hooks were very good most of that
Yeah,
game. Just that
his blitz was good that game, I thought.
you can't hook the Olaf though. And like those were it feels like very picky mistakes, but costly mistakes anyways. But like you said, I agree with you. I don't think the bot lane is the ones that you got to look at here. They pretty much ran it in their solo lanes. Um, I would argue that they're like the patience. There's already like a thin layer of patience for this team, and I think it's already broken. I think they're already on the shit list of like LCS fans because
Yep.
people always give shit to teams that just take some random ass imports. And in this case, they took some random ass imports. And a lot of people came to the defense of Immortals saying, like, well, like they have a lot of faith in these guys. And there's a bunch of people saying, like, if you could import some players, one of them would be Castle. I think it was Castle. I don't remember if it was Castle or Mask. It was one of them. And I was like, okay, sure. Like, you're kind of selling me a little bit. And then this game just put that all to bed because Mask just sprinted it,
Yeah,
specifically Mask.
Mask did not look very good in either of the games. I didn't think Castle really did either, but it's not like he was making these egregious mistakes like Mask was, where he's just inting his face off. He was just like losing and not doing anything
Yeah.
other than losing.
And
So,
so,
and
yeah,
we haven't said anything about Armeo, but basically everything that I said last week with regards to this team is Armeo is just never going to have the opportunity to do anything because he's trying to fill up so many holes, and you kind of saw that in both of the games.
Immortalitis.
Immortalitis, yes.
Oh man, it's coming down with immortalitis. What's the cure?
Get the fuck off the team.
A trade?
Rip up your contract.
A trade.
Buy yourself out. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know what the cure is for immortalitis. Maybe that could be FlyQuest's new
I don't know. Maybe the answer is just like grow a pair of fucking balls and be like, hey, we're playing around me. Like we're playing around me. I'm not picking Maokai and Rel. We're picking Lee Sin Viego, and you guys are playing around me.
I
That's the
think
cure.
FlyQuest should raise funds for immortalitis, and I think that should be their push this year
There we go.
on all their
That's the cause
socials.
that we found.
Yeah, and so I think maybe every Chemtech Drake that they kill, that looks like a
Did
plague
you
of
just
some
say that
sort.
specifically because it's green and Immortals is green, or?
No, I said because it's like a plague looking dragon.
Oh,
Like it
okay.
looks like a sickness.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
And if they're coming down with immortalitis, you kill it by killing the dragon. For every dragon, they donate to Immortals Fund to become less of a joke. And then we wouldn't have to make fun of this team every week. And the Clown Fiesta podcast gets a buff because we're more positive people. Yeah.
We'll figure it out, but we'll get an email together, send it to FlyQuest, and we can hopefully change Immortals for the better.
We said some good things about them.
I
Their
don't
bot lane
know.
was decent.
They fucking stink, yo.
They do. Okay. I still don't think it's for sure that they're going to finish last.
Who's gonna finish last then?
So here's the problem.
They're gonna be
100
tied for
Thieves and
last.
Dig 100 Thieves and Dig already have one win. And like it might be a stretch for Immortals to get that one win.
And the
Also,
bigger problem is they lost Dig already. Like that's supposed to be a game where like that's when you can pick up one of those wins, and they've already lost that game.
yeah, don't forget they could they could still play NRG. Or
This
did
is
they
true.
play NRG?
No, no.
NRG loses to bad teams all the time. TL throws leads all the time.
TL actually also did lose to Immortals last year, so the stars are aligning.
Hope's not lost. The bot lane played fine. Uh
But
Armeo is I still think Armeo's not that
here's the
bad.
thing: do we expect the bot lane to play fine the rest of the season? I say no.
They got Ole. I say yes.
Okay, fair enough.
Like, okay, not the whole season, but like a few games. I trust in Ole.
Gotcha.
Okay, were there any like big surprises that we missed that like we didn't touch on? Were there any other big surprises this week?
I'm trying to think of like other like wacky champion picks that happened, but I don't. We talked about Insanity Zach, the Sniper Riven.
Yep.
What else was anything? Was there really nothing else interesting apart from that? I mean, the double
Uh,
the double support item stuff was kind of like, I mean, not necessarily surprising because we've seen it in some other regions, but
mhm.
um, I don't know. They didn't really talk about it too much when it actually happened. Like they I don't know. But I mean, they were just
Hmm.
doing it with like Senna. I think they did it. Senna Seraphine. They did one with Seraphine Karma, and then did they do it when they played Senna Tom Kench? Did they do double support item? I can't remember. I
I
don't
don't
know.
know. I don't recall.
Oh, and then, actually, and somebody did it. Somebody did it. I think when they played Senna Nautilus. What game was that? Because I remember the casters talked about how Nautilus went the Blood Song upgrade, which is the one that
Someone played
Lucian
Senna
normally does.
Nautilus this week?
Yeah,
I don't even remember that either. Dude, I always have trouble remembering all the games. This should be my year. There's 8 teams, and I still can't remember them.
it happened today, didn't it? I'm gonna find it right now.
If you fucking say so. I don't know,
Yeah,
man.
100 Thieves played it and they lost.
Oh,
They had, yeah, they were splitting farm, and Nautilus went the Blood Song, which is the one that
let's
like
see.
Lucian's supposed to go, which is like the PTA type thing that you get. Still don't know how that damn support item works.
Is there a patch next week?
Yes,
I'm kind of excited for that.
we're on the live patch, so hey,
We might have to
all
consider
that double support shit's being thrown out the window. So,
Yeah, we might have to consider doing a segment every week where there's like a patch to just be like pick one thing that you want to see. Maybe we could do something like that.
well, I mean, the patch notes aren't even out yet, so we don't even know.
No, that's not good.
That I mean, I'm
That
telling you
that
that
plan gets thrown right out the window.
it's gonna get weird because there's a new patch that drops. Like the notes are gonna come out Monday. The patch drops Tuesday, and we're playing games on a Saturday. So
But we think they fix a lot of bugs like pretty quick, right?
I'm not even just talking about from the bug perspective, just like
No, I know that. I
the
know.
random bullshit that pops up once in a blue moon. Any patch comes out where it's like, oh, you can do this and it's really OP. Like, well, guess what? That's gonna run rampant for that week.
True, but even a lot of that stuff also gets hotfixed too. Just it doesn't
You would
fully
have
get
thought the double
hotfixed.
support item would have got hotfixed, but it didn't.
Yeah, like not everything, like the super like crazy things get hotfixed, but not everything gets, you know. So you're right. In short, you're right. There's going to be some wacky things, which I mean, I'm for it. I'm down. Let's go. This is you are rewarded for cooking. This should be Insanity Split. Which I guess one quick thing I just thought of with Insanity, when he played the Corki, did it give you flashbacks to his crazy ass Corki packages back in the day? Do you remember these?
I don't remember these.
This was like what we when we started calling Insanity, like when he was living up to his name as being insane, was like crazy ass Corki packages. Um, I don't know if we really saw them this week, but I guess what I'm saying is if you see Corky locked in for Insanity and you're thinking Bedge, let him cook. Let him do his thing. He might run it down, but he might make a crazy ass play also.
I mean, you know
Uh
I love Insanity, so
yeah.
all good.
I don't need to convince you about Insanity. Should we talk about the LCK thing? The LCK
Yeah,
thing is going to
for
be interesting.
yeah, so there was a pretty big Reddit post that popped up a couple of days ago that was in tandem with a statement that was released by all 10 of the LCK, I guess I should say 9, 9 out of the 10 LCK teams with regards to the health of the league. And the one team that did was publicly against releasing the statement was T1. However, I will read a couple of things that came directly from that statement just to give you guys the most important information. So it said that a majority of the teams were in favor of releasing the statement. However, all teams were in agreement with the direction of change, but didn't want to do so in this fashion. Now, what were they talking about? Well, the majority of the statement was talking about the fact that the LCK has continued to grow ever since the introduction of franchising in the year 2020. How the viewership's been going up, the interest in the league has been growing, but all the teams have felt that the LCK themselves have not done enough to drive additional revenue within the league. Now, just off the jump, that's a little bit concerning just to hear, considering that the LCK is the most popular league. I'm not including the LPL in terms of viewership here because you don't have access to those Chinese numbers. But in terms of viewership, the LCK is the most popular league of all the leagues in the scene, minus the LPL. So the fact that the viewership continues to go up and up and up yet the teams are reporting that the revenue has not really matched the revenue growth has not matched that increase in viewership and demand is something to be concerned about.
Yeah, so I'm not surprised at that just because Gen G's GM Arnold, I think he's the GM, right?
Uh, GM or
Whatever
CEO?
he
Oh,
is.
I think he's a
Yeah, whatever he
CEO
is.
actually, not the GM.
Whatever he is, Arnold, a lot of people you might see his tweets because he does talk about things that are struggling with esports in general, like fairly often. So, highly recommend following him on Twitter if you do come across that across his Twitter. Um, so he's mentioned things like many times that like this is where esports struggles and LCK is not immune to this. LCK is a big part of it. So I'm not surprised to hear all that. What was surprising about this was somewhere in there they were talking about how they don't think they get compensated fairly like other regions do. So for those unaware, like the LCS, even though they operate at a loss, we think. I shouldn't even say that. We think they operate at a loss, but we don't know. They always help support their teams by giving what I've heard. I think Travis has said before, $2.5 million per year. Maybe that number has changed. I don't know. I don't know the exact specifics, but I do know that Riot supports some of the LCS teams so they don't all just go under and cave and lose all their money and just dip ski out of the league, so that the league is supported. And it sounded like by this post, it gave me the impression that the LCK teams are not being supported in the same way that LCS teams maybe, for example. Now, I think they just referenced Western team or no, they didn't. What they said, other major regions, actually, if I
Yeah,
remember right.
other major regions, that's correct.
So my first go-to was probably the LCS gets supported a lot. Did you think the same?
I mean, I mean, I just took it that the LCS plus the LEC. I mean, obviously the LPL is probably mixed in there as well, but I think everybody recognizes that the LPL probably it would be no surprise to hear that Riot supports the LPL a lot purely just because of the numbers that it pulls in. Like the LPL,
And
the viewership
regardless,
over there is insane.
I guess I should say that regardless of which other league they're referring to when they talk about other major regions being better supported, I'm just surprised that the LCK is one that's struggling this much because as you mentioned, maybe the LPL is more popular, but I don't think people would disagree with the LCK being the best league. Like, I think the LCK is the main pull for like Worlds, for example. Yes, the LPL gets a bunch of pull as far as fandom goes, but like, there's a bunch of North American fans that are tuning in to watch LCK teams. There's a bunch of European fans that are tuning in to watch LCK teams because traditionally they are the best region. And I know it's going to trigger a lot of LPL fans, but let's be real. The LCK wins worlds more than the LPL does. And so I guess my thought would be that if there's any league that you really, really want to protect, it's the one that Faker's playing in. It's the one that Deft is playing in. It's the one that Ruler has played in for God knows how long Ruler was in the LCK for. Like these are the guys. Like the LCK is where all the best players come from. Don't let that league suffer, man. Like you don't want to um play a game of chicken of just waiting for LCK teams to, weather out the esports winter. Like I feel like if you can support all the other major regions, then you should definitely be supporting the LCK as well.
Yeah, and just to put some of this stuff into perspective, with the statement they released, in the statement it said that the proposed revenue share from the franchising model, has been flat or declining each year, and that the LCK has not met its revenue targets since the inception of franchising in 2020, and distributions paid to the teams is much lower than other leagues. Obviously, what we were referring to earlier.
Yeah, and there was also something in there about like teams were God, I read this like an hour or so ago, so now I'm afraid of misquoting it. But there was something to the effect of like teams were afraid to speak out of like fear of being punished in some way, shape, or form. But like that's another thing that's really weird to me. Like if you have a business not making money, the teams that are running in your league should be more than comfortable in being able to say like, look, things need to change. Like there shouldn't be anything keeping them from voicing their concerns about the league. So that was something else. I was like, is that
Well,
real? Like, is that actually happening?
I mean, it notes in the statement, it says the LCK, like teams believe that the LCK has not convinced them of their vision and plans to improve and grow the league from a revenue perspective. Obviously, when it comes to the viewership and interest of the league, the teams all understand that it's been increasing, and that's probably one of the determining factors why the league is still doing so well. But the fact that the revenue is not there to match it is obviously what's giving teams these big concerns.
Yeah, and I don't want to keep going on about what was said in the post just because again I'm going to forget a bunch of it. So I do highly recommend people go and find the Reddit post. Um cuz you'll find it. It's pretty recent, right? It was like 4
Three,
days
four
ago or
days
something.
ago, yeah.
Yeah. And I do think there's a lot of interesting stuff in there, but I guess the main thing that I want to talk about with you, Jinter, is like, do you think this makes a difference? Do you think the team's coming out saying something and like kind of uniting behind this letter or whatever that they put out? Do you think like it actually makes a difference?
I mean, probably. I mean, we go back 6 months ago and the LCS implemented a similar tactic to where
Yeah.
they felt that the league was not doing things properly, wasn't communicating to the teams and the orgs and the owners properly, and was doing things that wasn't in the best of shared interests between the league and the teams. And they took to making a public statement and you sort of creating a list of demands, if we want to call it. Like they had some demands of their own in there, but I presume that they probably saw the LCS using this tactic at the beginning of summer and followed suit.
So I actually also think it will make a difference, and the reason why is because Riot is like notoriously bad for getting ahead of things and like fixing problems before they become before everyone makes a big stink about it. But like whenever people do, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, we should try to probably do something so that people aren't pissed at us. They're very, very reactionary and not proactive whatsoever. If there's a lot of criticisms to give to Riot Games, proactivity is probably towards the top of the list. They are really, really bad they just do things without thinking that there's going to be consequences, or they'll just not do things and think people will just be fine with it. And it's like it takes people speaking up about something for Riot to finally do something. And so my hope is that this makes a difference. My hope is that you do support your Riot Games. You can afford it. My hope is that they do, you know, put the money forward to support your best players in the world. Like the LCK is one of the biggest contributors to the biggest event of the world, maybe the biggest contributor to Worlds. Like them along with China, don't let them fail. Like it would be so bad to let the LCK partners fail.
Yeah, I mean, and considering the statement, it's a joint statement with all the teams, and hearing that a lot of these teams, especially some of the lower tier ones, are struggling. If this were to continue, it would not surprise me to see a similar downsizing that we saw in the LCS. Like if something like this were to continue. Now I don't expect it to, especially because the LCK is of such importance to the health of the game in general and League of Legends and the pro scene to begin with. Because like you said, the majority of the teams that are attending international events, they're winning those. The majority of the Korean players are always the most popular players in the world, whether it's your Deft, your Faker, your I don't know, your Ambition back in the day, your Smeb, your Prey, Gorilla, whoever it may be. Like a lot of the most popular players in the world are from Korea.
Anyone on T1 at the moment,
Yeah,
pretty much.
anyone on T1 when T1's doing really really well.
Honestly, anyone on T1 maybe at any time.
I don't know about any time, but when they're all doing really well.
Nearly though. Like there's some years where like T1 hasn't won Worlds, but it's just like everyone knows this player now because they're on T1. Anyways,
Who
I
was
think.
on T1 in season 8 when they didn't make Worlds? Do you know? Can you name
Oh
anybody
no.
that wasn't Faker?
Don't test me by what year
I'm
it
just
was.
saying. I'm just
That was the year
saying.
after Hooney?
Yeah.
Who was on there after Hooney? Not fair. I didn't
I'm
study
just
for
I'm
this
just saying it
test.
was a year because I said it was when they're doing well. Obviously, everybody knows who they are, but
No, that's a good point. I did not study for this test. I fail. Anything
just
else
for the
on the
record, I can't either. But I just like I don't know.
Okay, so we both suck at
Was
this
Bang still on the
T1
team then,
trivia.
or did he go to NA at that point? Can't even. I don't think he was in NA yet.
I don't think he was because I think Bang came to the LCS
Well,
when
season 9 when 100 Thieves.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I think he was on T1 right before that, right?
yeah. I just don't know if there was anybody in the interim for that.
We should talk about something else before we look even dumber.
Okay.
Okay, actually though, anything else on the LCK thing? Was there anything else that you wanted to say on it?
I just I do wonder if they saw the LCS do this last year and decided to do the same, because it would not surprise me at all. Just because obviously I think people are still upset that the LCS or Riot didn't maybe incorporate all the changes that people were lobbying for, whether that was the public, the Players Association, other pro players, former who necessarily weren't associated with the Players Association, but this will lead to change. How big that change is, we don't know. But considering that the LCK is the biggest league in the world, not named the LPL in China, just purely from a viewers and numbers basis, Riot should be taking this pretty seriously.
Mm, yeah, I agree. Um, we got game predictions, yeah?
Yep.
Week 2. Did we
Week.
tie this week?
Yep, 6-2.
6-2. That makes it sound pretty smart.
Yeah, kind of. Usually the beginning of the season is bad, but everything kind of went how we expected it the first few week. I did take an upset or two, so that's why I'm not a I mean, obviously the first game nobody was expecting 100 Thieves to beat Team Liquid, but I also picked Shopify to upset FlyQuest, so I'm not too mad about it.
Yeah. Okay, so first game on Saturday, we got Dig versus Cloud9. We're both going Cloud9.
Yes, I'm going Cloud9.
NRG 100 Thieves, or 100 Thieves rather. NRG. They better not lose this game, man.
NRG, yes.
Team Liquid and FlyQuest. I am gonna go FlyQuest.
Upset
He's
alert?
thinking.
Question mark. I'm gonna go
He's
Team
thinking.
Liquid.
Yep. He's thinking about
Uh,
Yawn popping off. Right now,
I
Yawn's
am.
popping off
Yeah,
in your head.
honestly, and that's the main reason for it is I think the TL bot lane is much better than the FlyQuest bot lane.
Okay, picture this. Yawn, or not Yawn. APA is just strolling along on a little tiny Yordle. He might have a bomb or two, and
Okay.
then Jensen just shockwaves him out of nowhere, and it gets erased. What about that?
I mean, as long as other things are happening on the other side of the map in favor of Team Liquid, sure. I'm good with that.
Okay, all right, let's go FlyQuest. Immortals and Shopify. I'm gonna go Shopify. Go with that.
Shopify, yes.
Okay, then on Sunday, Dig versus 100 Thieves. I am going to go Dig.
I'm gonna go 100 Thieves.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a pretty close match. I can't really say I'm picking 100 Thieves other than I'm just wanting Sniper to just do something random and cool.
Rich is gonna shit on him.
I mean, maybe.
Maybe. Maybe you have trust in Quid.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. He had a decent 1 week. We'll baby steps, baby steps.
Okay, Cloud9 and Shopify. I'm going Cloud9.
Yes, Cloud9.
NRG FlyQuest. I am gonna go FlyQuest.
Man, it feels kind of weird for me to like pick FlyQuest here if I said that they were gonna lose to TL, but then they're gonna beat NRG. But I don't know. Maybe NRG's just starting 2-2, and I'm picking FlyQuest because I
We
just
said that we want FlyQuest to be 2-0 against Cloud9 or 4-0 when they play
no. I'm
Cloud9.
I'm gonna have to take. Unfortunately I'm gonna have to take NRG, and I think it's because of the same reason that I think the NRG bot lane is just gonna be a lot better than the FlyQuest bot lane.
Okay, so you got FlyQuest going 0-2 this week.
And damn, that's crazy.
Okay, and then we got Team Liquid and Immortals. Should I
Do they have
take him?
Immortals playing like on the if they had Immortals playing on the last game of the day every single game for the first 4 games then?
They did the one game for sure.
Yeah, the
They've
first
earned that spot.
they have earned that spot, that most
Well,
definitely.
it depends on if you how you look at it actually, because some people could be like they haven't earned that spot. You know,
No, but
like
the
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 last
the
game of the
last
day,
game
some
is
people would
always
say is
reserved
the
for the shit tier teams.
sure, but some people would argue that the last game should be like I've heard Cubby say it many times, fight night. You know, he wants the
I
best game to be played
I've
last.
I've
I've heard,
always been in
yeah,
agreement with that.
I've heard you say that as well, and so like you could see why some people might argue they don't deserve.
Yeah, fair enough.
Anyways, I don't know if I got the balls to take Immortals, man.
Have you that's crazy if you're even thinking about taking them.
It is crazy. Like brain is saying TL, heart is saying TL, balls are saying Immortals.
Okay.
This could be my first bet with my testicles of the year. I'm gonna go Immortals,
Oh lord.
and I'm gonna regret it.
You will. I'll predict in addition that you will regret it.
Yeah. Okay. Can we also keep a separate tracker of how my balls are doing in predictions
Okay,
this
well,
year?
this will be the first one then.
Okay. That's it for predictions. We got quick news.
Yeah, not too much quick news, just a little bit here. First up, the viewership numbers came out for the first couple weeks of various regions around the world, and let's just say not much has changed. The LCS is not doing as well as other regions. A little bit
Whatever.
surprised. Well, honestly, it was kind of a little bit surprising just considering that the other leagues had so much viewership in comparison to some of their like week ones of previous years. I think LEC had a week one high of 750,000. LCK had a week one high of 1.1 mil. and LCS's week 1 high was like 150K.
Do you have like what LCS was last year, week one?
I don't know if I think I might have to pay for like the premium version of esports charts, so I don't know about that. I mean, give me a sec
I
here.
bet you
I might be able to figure it out.
there's probably a Reddit post or something that
Oh,
has that.
true, but that'd be a Jesus.
Yeah. Um. I for me, it's very whatever. Mostly because I don't expect I expect the LCS changes to be good and I expect it to help the league. Even best case scenario, let's say the LCS just starts popping off because all these changes are so good and everyone's interested in fresh patch. Yeah, I'm so excited. Like I wouldn't expect that to make a huge splash in week 1 anyways. I think that the the changes the LCS needs, and we don't know if they're going to get them, but the changes that the LCS needs to um change the image of the LCS over a long period of time. Like no one's the LCS image is not just going to change just because we made some off-season changes as to like how we're going to do champ select and how we're going to interact with Twitch chat. Like the product needs people need to have more faith restored in the product, and that happens over the span of multiple splits or maybe even years rather than just week 1 of LCS.
I don't
So
know.
am I coping? Yeah, but I don't think what I'm saying is untrue.
Yeah, I mean, I like. Don't get me wrong. I didn't necessarily expect the viewership to be like high or super increased by any means, but I just thought that with the increase that we saw in the LEC, at the very least, that was going to give the LCS maybe a little bit more push, but didn't really happen.
The other thing with the LEC is I think we talked about this when Mad Lions were putting together their all Spanish roster. I remember saying like I understand people not wanting rosters built off of what nationality are you. I totally get that. But I did say like this is going to be really freaking good for viewership. It's going to get people interested. And obviously K Corp they came in and don't spoil today's games. I haven't watched, but as far as I know, K Corp is 0 and 4 because I watched yesterday's games. And like I still hear K Corp fans cheering and they're definitely watching.
Well,
So it's like
just to put a little bit into perspective, in the first week, K Corp's 3 matches were the 3 of the top 4 highest viewed matches in that week.
and it's mostly built around them being the French org. Like if
Yeah.
you're from France, you're probably cheering for
The
them.
the
Maybe
number
EDS.
the number one viewed match and what was the peak viewership in LEC week 1 was Mad versus K or it was Mad Koi versus KC.
There you have it. Now again, I'm not saying, oh, everyone needs to start building their rosters based around what flag, goes next to their name on the wiki. But you can't ignore that there's some positives in having Spain versus France and etc. There's a bunch of motherfucking countries over in Europe, and I think they should continue to push that advantage where it makes sense to do so. I don't think they should make every team like, oh, here's the UK team, and here's the French team, and here's like, I don't think that. But there's clearly some advantages there, and the LEC is going to thrive when they do have teams that are supported by
Ooh,
region.
LEC is thriving, you could say, huh?
Yeah, could you not?
Well, I was just the meme is like LCS is thriving. Do you remember that from
Oh,
last
I
year?
remember.
Yeah.
The LCS is coping. That's for damn sure. I am right along with all the other copers. Um,
Well, next up, people were. I mean, I guess we should say. Speaking of the LEC, because this is something LEC related. People were wondering, hey, why is Quickshot not on the LEC broadcast? And there's a little clip on Twitter that's been making the rounds. Quickshot,
Careful now.
he's uh he's referencing a certain German dictator in this clip of him doing
German Voldemort,
sorry for the audio only people. You won't see this, but he's doing something that looks a little bit like this.
like
And
waving.
yeah, he uttered a name, and from what it sounds like, he's been removed from the LEC broadcast. So
Hey, let's be careful about waving around them hands while we're on. I'm just saying.
I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. I did something, but I didn't say anything.
uh, do we have to make it clear that we don't support blah blah blah? Like, obviously not.
Yeah, we
Like,
don't.
anyway, not a good move.
Yeah, not a good move.
And posting that to Twitter also, like, is that worse? Is the posting it to Twitter
Yes,
worse than the actual? Like,
yes,
they're both terrible moves. But as far as like dumb, like we've all just done dumb things before, and like, thank God we're not on camera for when it happens. Actively going out of your way to then post it on social media is dumber, I would argue.
yes. I would agree.
Because that takes like time and thought, like where you're like, I'm going to do this. This is a good idea. Whereas, like, as soon as Quickshot did his German Voldemort impression, I'm sure he was probably like, "What have I done? This is not going to be good."
Yeah. Well, anyways, last
Uh,
up, and something
well,
that's actually.
hang
Oh,
on.
you have more
I
things to say?
I just have to say, I hope that he's not completely canceled for that. He's an idiot, but we are all idiots sometimes, and I hope that he still goes on the broadcast. Like, I know that some people might think that I'm supporting that. Obviously not, but I do think that people make mistakes, man. Like, let them be part of the LEC broadcast. Quickshot's been there for years. That's all I'm saying. Okay.
Last up, honestly, pretty interesting, is that the PCS and the VCS are going to be implementing 1v1s for side selection. And there's already a pretty big clip that got posted on the subreddit of, I believe it was in the PCS, to where Gory, former Golden Guardians mid laner, obviously people know his name from his time in the LCS last year, he based during this 1v1 session and died in the Ring of Fire. So for the people who don't know how it works now in the PCS and the VCS, in the PCS, for the first game to decide which team gets side selection for game number one, they do a 1v1, similar to the format that they have in the All Stars tournament, to where it's like first 2 kills or 100 CS or first tower. But there's an additional caveat where at 7 minutes, a ring of fire starts closing around the map. And so Gory based past 7 minutes and then died to the fire because he respawned in the fire, which is pretty
Oh, I
funny.
did not know that.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. But
I
slightly differently in the VCS, they do instead do it for the third game if a series is tied 1-1, or they do it in the fifth game of a BO5 if the series is tied 2-2.
Sounds fun.
It does sound fun, but then all the comments are basically saying that, like, oh, this is just an additional way that pros are gonna get flamed now. And I was like, that's kind of
Eh,
sucks, but
that's not a reason to not do something. There's a bunch of people that are gonna love it and enjoy the 1v1 also. Like, you're not gonna please everyone all the time. Yeah, some people are gonna hate you because you lost the 1v1, and yeah, people are gonna get flamed. You get flamed for all the shit you do in games anyways. And I'm not condoning that people are gonna flame them for that. I'm not condoning that, but like, people flame the hell out of, well, anyone for making a mistake.
yeah,
What
what's new?
Yeah, that's I don't know if this is something that I would want in the LCS, because again, I think we're kind of trying to make the broadcast shorter right now, but I do think it's a fun little thing, and I think that's cool.
Yeah, I like it.
That's my take. Anything else, Jinter? Is that it?
That's it. I mean, I'll just double check in case we missed something, but
Okay, while you're doing that, I'm going to remind people one last time to subscribe and know that we will be back next week. Um, For now, we've been going live around 11 p.m. sometime around then, EST, and then 8 o'clock on the West Coast. That might change, but for now, that's what we've been doing. So I don't know. Uh, Follow JNT or myself on Twitter. He's usually tweeting it out, and I'll be retweeting. Or you can hop on our Discord. We'll usually link in there that we're going live. So there's ways to find out that we're going live. And otherwise, just you'll if you don't want to listen to the live show and you just want a podcast, we're on a bunch of platforms: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. Look for the Clown Fiesta podcast and you'll find us. And yeah, let us know what you guys think about this episode. Let us know if there's anything that we got wrong. We are not too sensitive that we're not afraid to be told that we said something stupid or wrong. We'll read the
we will
comments.
flame you back if you deserve it.
Maybe. Yeah, so that's it. Anything else on Reddit, Jinter?
No,
Nothing?
that's it.
Okay. We'll see you guys next week. This has been episode 149 of the Clown Fiesta podcast.